Just leaves me now to introduce our main principal speaker for this evening, which is Clancy I from the Pacific Group in Los Angeles, who celebrates 50 years of sobriety this month. Clancy.
My name is Clancy Imislund, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm very glad to be here again tonight. I've been really enjoyed this weekend. I wasn't sure if I would or not, but I did. Has someone been drinking out of this glass? But it really has been pleasant. I've enjoyed. I got here a little late, and I was glad to get out of the. Every time I come here in the airplane, I get off the plane and work through that hideous airport, and there's Sally waiting, looking doubtful, and she drives me down. And got here a little late this year because the plane schedule had changed, and I just had time to rush upstairs and shower and shave and change clothes and come over here. But I enjoyed the night last night, and I've been really enjoyed the workshops this weekend. Sometimes I can't get to them; they take me on tours or something. But Eileen and Gail really had splendid workshops, and much to my surprise, this morning I was able to learn a trade. If you need your big book fixed, I can do it. But it really is a nice time, because I enjoy that history, all that history stuff especially, and I really enjoyed it all. I'm glad to be here tonight. And I want to thank Sally for her graciousness to me. I'm always mean to her, and I hate myself for doing it, but something about her just makes me want to crack her one. Not my fault. And I want to thank the boys from Ireland, Dermot and his friends, who was just over there on Tuesday and Wednesday. They took very good care of me. Some of them came over here to rub salt in my wounds. And Thursday night I was in Belfast, of course, and it really has been a very nice week. And I'm going to go back to Los Angeles relaxed. But I tell you, I was listening especially to the 10-minute speakers, because sometimes the 10-minute speakers are a little off, and they talk about dumb things. But tonight, all four of the 10-minute speakers have been very good this weekend. And as I sat and listened to them, I tried to listen to them, because I know we have a lot of new people here tonight, and listen to think, what do I have in common with these people? And there's nothing, as a new person, I would say that I have in common with these four people. We drank, but that isn't really enough. And it takes a while in AA to come to realize what the commonality is. One of the most, as I mentioned last night, I read the book and found it very dull and never liked the book much to speak of until after I was sober a while. But after I was sober a while, I remember reading idly one night, glancing through chapter 3, and thought to myself, my God, if I'd understood that when I was new in 1949, I would have been sober a long time now. Because it really talks about what people here have in common. It talks about, what do we have in common? Well, we all drank differently, had different histories, different backgrounds. But there's one thing in that chapter, in that beginning page chapter. It talks about people like us, alcoholics of our type, have seemed to, all of us along the way somewhere, have accepted or gotten the obsession that somehow, someday, I will control and enjoy my drinking. And it says the persistence of this illusion is astonishing. And there isn't anybody here, I'm sure, who's an alcoholic who doesn't understand that. There must be some way to do it. And then it goes on to say that we fight the term alcoholic, we fight being against that. And we have, much to our chagrin later, occasional brief recoveries, followed always by a still worse relapse. And again, hope we'll do it, and get to that stage. What a tasty little phrase. Get to a stage of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I remember reading that and thinking, boy, these people really get drunk to get like that. But that isn't what that means at all. That's how you feel after you sober up again. And people want some explanations. and you haven't got any, and you just feel desperate. I remember once upon a time a judge in my hometown when I was a young man. I was so sorry. God, I was so sorry I'd done something terrible. Really, it wasn't terrible, but it got me expelled from the university a week before graduation. And I was so sad. I said, "Oh, Judge Farr, I'm so sorry. I'm so He said, "Clancy," he was a friend of our family. He said, "Clancy, I'm sorry that you're so sorry." I thought, what the hell is that about? I said, "Why is that, Judge?" He said, "Because when people are as sorry as you are, they're not only sorry for what they've done, but they're sorry because they know they'll do it again. And who would ever think such a thing?" And I thought, what a dumb thing. But I went back years later and found he was absolutely right. And it's so hard to find. I just love that little paragraph at the end of that section where they talk about what people like us do to keep drinking. Change it from one kind of booze to another kind of booze. Drinking beer only. Now, that'll work. Maybe just natural wines. That's quicker. Reading spiritual literature, going to health farms and camps, taking a trip, not taking a trip. I remember reading that and thinking, I've done all of those things except one. I've never tried not taking a trip. Because when the heat is on, I move it out, I'll tell you that. I don't want to be one of those cowards that stay and face the consequences. But that's where we are. That's where we're in common. We're in common out of sight, not on the surface, but out of sight. And I never knew that. That's why I slipped so many years. Although I really didn't slip. You know, we talk a lot about slipping in AA, and we're talking to someone about it. And there seems to be two major causes of slips, as far as I can see. One is you don't really believe you're an alcoholic. That's, I think, most of the slips are that way. I was in and out of AA for 10 years. I could say, well, I was slipping. So I wasn't really slipping. I never believed I was here. I stayed here till the heat was off and drank again. One of the hardest things for people like me, maybe not for you, but for me, was to come to accept the fact that I'm an alcoholic. Because I'm not an alcoholic, because alcoholics are people whose problem is alcohol, and my problem really isn't alcohol, except when I'm drinking. I got a lot of problems worse than alcohol. And I'm not an alcoholic, and I'm not going to return to God, because when God finds me, I'm screwed. And show my gratitude by helping others, that's just nonsense. And I can't do that, and I can't become an alcoholic. And I very nearly died as a result of that. But then there's another type of slipping too, and it's when you've been sober a while. In 1945, to get back to the history of this program, Bill Wilson, in an effort to save it before he wrote the traditions, had started the Grapevine. And the Grapevine helped a little, not much. But Dr. Silkworth wrote an article in one of the early Grapevines on slips. He was Bill Wilson's doctor, but he's not an alcoholic. He said, you people make such a big deal about slips as though some sort of celestial punishment for some wrong you've done. He said, that isn't it at all. We see them in medicine all the time. People come to us with a severe heart problem. We get them through the crisis. We give them a regime to follow. You sleep, you get your exercise, you eat these foods, you don't eat these foods, you do the daily exercise, you do these things, and they flourish. But after a while, and they're really feeling good for a long time, I don't really need that exercise as much as I used to. And they just continue the exercise little by little, or they eat the food they shouldn't, because nothing bad happens at all. Everything just stays great. Great, I'm just wonderful. But little by little, they're moving away. And one day, they're just a step too far, and down they go. It says the same thing with diabetics. We take diabetics in deep situations and work through them, work with them. And we give them a regime to follow. Take this insulin every day. Don't eat these foods. Eat those foods. Get your exercise, do these things. And they flourish. But after a while, when you feel good a long time, I don't really think a couple of cookies would hurt me tonight. I mean, my God, I'm not a freak. Nothing bad happens. And I forgot my insulin. Oh, well, I'll make it up later. And I'm not getting as much rest as I should, but everything is fine. And they don't know it. They're moving away little by little. And one day, one step too far, down they go. That's all that ever happens to you alcoholics. You come here, you're sick, you get a regime to follow, you go to meetings, you try to help others, you take certain actions, you get out of your mind, off yourself, and you flourish. But after a while, sometimes after a year, sometimes after 25 years, I don't really think those meetings are required anymore. I don't need them much anymore. And I may have an unlisted phone number. I'm sick and tired of whiners calling me day and night with their nonsense. And if I need anything, I'll get back to AA. I'm an AA member. Little by little, they move away. And one day the storm comes up and there's nothing there, and down they go. And people say, oh, I wonder what he did wrong that made him get drunk. You don't have to do anything wrong to get drunk. All you have to do is stop doing the things that keep you sober. And that's how you slip. There are people today who say it's just natural to slip in AA. It is if you're not an AA, but it isn't natural if you're an AA member doing these things. And I had a long slipping period, and I came to AA as I never could accept AA really because, remember, somebody read the 12 promises. This is what you can get out of AA. And I thought, Jesus, that's what I get out of drinking. I intuitively know how to handle things that used to baffle me. I don't fear financial insecurity as long as I still get a check in my checkbook. Give them all one, Jim. Oh, shit. And, all sorts of things. And AA is designed for people who are not like me, designed for people whose problem is alcohol. And I never had the slightest idea it is absolutely not designed for people whose problem is alcohol. But it took me a long time to find that out. And I came as kind of a high-bottom drunk after the war. I'd run away from home when I was 15, early in the Second World War, and ran away to sea and learned to drink a little bit and enjoyed drinking. Drinking was I remember telling people, and I felt this even though I was slipping in AA, alcohol is the best friend I ever had. That sounds terrible in an AA meeting if you're new, I suppose, but friends come and go. Jobs come and go, lovers come and go, cities come and go, but when a few drinks is just making the difference, boom. That's great, wherever you are. And the only problem is I sometimes drink a little too much, but I'll work on it. And I get in trouble sometimes. But after the war, I took some tests so I didn't have to go back to high school. And I went to the University of Wisconsin. I got through the University of Wisconsin, met a girl there with black flashing eyes and black hair, something you never see in the Norwegian Lutheran Church. And she seemed I wish you'd have laughed in time. She won my heart, and we got married, and I got expelled from the university. I was supposed to teach journalism in Duluth, Minnesota, but instead they canceled me. And so I had started to change my career, and I've been to work in newspapers. I became a sports writer, and which is still to this day my favorite job I ever had. But then my wife again began manifesting the behavior of Catholics that I never heard about before, never dreamed of. And if there's any little Protestant boys here thinking of marrying a Catholic, if she's a good Catholic, I have some news for you. You are about to have a big family, pal. Whether you want one or not. And I began my next career as a national distributor of small Catholics. I remember saying to my wife, can't we use birth control? No. But I don't know what I'd have done if she'd have said yes when I think about it. Because in those days, for young people today, it's hard to realize, nobody talked about these things. I'd been in the merchant service until I was 17, and then in the Navy overseas. I'd been in a Navy hospital while they dug stuff out of me. I went through a major university, and I had maybe heard the word condom once in my life. In a Navy training film, they showed this baby, this wonderful woman with big honkers and just lovely, and they implied if I didn't use a condom, I'd get some terrible disease. And at that stage of my life, I didn't care what I'd got if I could be with her. When you see birth control, you see kind of bad kids. Older people remember this, younger people don't. Bad kids come around and say, I got a rubber. And even they would be ashamed to go in and buy them. They'd have to get someone depraved. They'd go and say, hey, give me a pack of cigarettes and some rubbers. Now look how much progress we've made since then. All over the world today, a drugstore by my house, people come in, kids come in. I guess they're not grown up, but they look like kids to me. They say, hey, give me a package of condoms and some cigarettes, you know. They're different. But all these years I drank, and drinking got me through a lot of things. I seem to have a lot of bad breaks, but drinking got me through. And I went up and down and up and down, and alcohol was just a lifesaver. Sometimes I drank too much and got in trouble. They said, why don't you go to AA? And so I went to AA to take the heat off a little bit. I wasn't ordered there, and sat in meetings with these old fools, all of them over 40, and I was 22. I didn't know what the hell, they didn't have anything in common with me, I didn't have anything in common with them. But at least it took the heat off where I was working. And that happened again and again and again. But I gradually, over the period of years, went from a high-bottom drunk to a medium-bottom drunk to a low-bottom drunk. It's just a series of bad breaks and misunderstandings, again and again. And one day I found myself in a situation that a person of my background and intelligence and ability can't be in. Two big guys were throwing me out of a Skid Row mission in Los Angeles. And stay out of here, you mooch! And I tried to explain to them, I'm not a mooch. 3 years ago, I was on the faculty of the University of Texas. Ads that I wrote, the L.C. Nelmer ads for the Borden Company, were running that very week in Life and Time, the New Yorker. I've had my picture in the New York Times for one of my achievements. But it's really hard to explain these things in midair, you know. And I stood outside of that damn old mission in a town where I didn't know anybody. I just knew one person. He'd give me some money, and then he told me to stay away from him. And it was raining. I stood in the rain, cold rain, and I had a terrible feeling. I didn't know what the feeling was, but I know what it is now because I've seen other people have it. When you suddenly realize, I'm sure it's happened to some people in here, there's no friendly direction. It's all, no one's going to be glad to see you, wherever you go. And I just stood there and felt so bad. How can this be happening to me? If some young old guy had come up to me that morning and said, you know, Slim, you're dying. You're down to 120-some pounds. You've lost your wife and children. You'll never see them again. You've lost your career. Once upon a time, they called you a boy genius. You can't even get a job washing dishes. You have no clothes. You have no ID. Remember the guy gave you a car to drive from Dallas to Los Angeles? You got drunk in Phoenix and lost the car with all your clothes and all your ID. And you remember that day because that's the day where you got in a beef with a cop and he threw you in jail overnight, and in the middle of the night you were so sick you went over and vomited on somebody's bunk by accident. And he was so cross he kicked your front teeth out. That's why you have no front teeth. That's why you're bleeding down the front of your chin. And he might have said, your little mother up in Wisconsin is no longer allowed to accept phone calls from you because your stepfather's so tired of watching you play on her emotions. So she'll go down to her tiny little bank account, take out a few more dollars, and send it to her little boy to help him. You'd rather have her think you're dead than the way you are. And he might have said, you've been sitting in AA meetings now off and on for 10 years, and you just think how stupid these people are, and their little steps, and their little slogans, and their little traditions, and keep coming back, and all. Just idiots. And you envy them because you've been cursed with intelligence. And now you're dying. And he might have said, why don't you go back to AA at least one more time and at least honestly admit you're an alcoholic? And if someone said that to me, and if I were in the mood to be honest, I'd have to say, you don't understand, pal. I'm not an alcoholic. I'll tell you an odd thing. I wish I were. Oh my God, do I wish I were an alcoholic. So I could quit drinking and be like these idiots and get feel good again. And alcohol, I don't know how to explain it to people. Alcohol is not my problem. When I'm drunk, it is, but how do I explain this? For one reason, I knew I was an alcoholic. Alcoholics can't stop drinking. We hear that all the time. Once you drink, you can't stop. I could always stop. When I got enough remorse, I stop. And I quit. And my problem has never been that I can't quit when I'm full of remorse. My problem is that in a day or two, sometimes as the remorse diminishes, sooner or later, in a day or two or a week, somebody seems to sneak into my bedroom in the night and put an invisible spring in my gut. And the next day, somebody starts to tighten it. And it doesn't come out as, I need a drink. It comes out as just a little growing restlessness, little irritability, a little tired of getting my daily sermon of what I did in my last drunk. Get off it! A little crossness, watching little by little whatever technicolor there is in my existence slowly turn back to gray. And I'll tell you, when I was successful and had money, I spent a lot of money to beat that. I spent thousands of dollars in psychoanalysis to try to find a way to beat that. I got into cults. I joined things. I read things. I did all sorts of things. But I'll tell you something. If you're new, it's bad news for you. When that feeling comes and you can't stand it, there's a way to beat it. A couple drinks. Then, unfortunately, when you have a couple drinks, sometimes you drink too much again. And then people say, see, your problem was alcohol, wasn't it? You have to say, yeah, I guess it was. But inside you just want to shriek, no, it wasn't! It wasn't! You don't understand. I'm not an alcoholic. I wish to God I was. I could be that like that, but I'm not. But nobody came up and talked to me that morning. I just stood in the street corner. One thing I'd learned in the last 2 or 3 months when my life had really finished off was this. When you really drink too much and you smell bad and you look bad and you're unshaven and you're sick and you're covered with vomit, there's only one place where you can go that I know of. You can always go to an AA club. That's the only place in the world where the worse you look, the better they like it. This one's mine, Jim. So I said to some mooch standing next to me in that street corner, I said, where's the AA club? He said, well, there's none down here. You have to go to Wilshire and Fairfax. I said, Jesus, pal, how do I get there? He said, well, Wilshire doesn't come down this far. You have to go up this street, to Hill Street, and cut over to Wilshire and walk west till you come to Fairfax. All right. And the way I went, I still vaguely remember that walk. I walked and walked and walked. I was almost in a stupor. I counted later in the car 7.5 miles. God, that's a long way to walk in a cold rain and sick and you can't hardly breathe. And I got to this stupid club and the same old crap, the same old goofy steps and return to God, live and let live. Easy does it. Remember when? Keep it up. God loves you. I love AA. Okay. And some old fool, welcome, you're home, son. Ha 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 ha. But I lurked around that club that day, tried to stay out of sight until it stopped raining. And there was a meeting that night, and I went to that, and they served cake. I ate about 4 pounds of cake because I could chew that. Then they had a meeting on gratitude, and I almost vomited it all up again. Then everybody went home. It was still raining. The manager of the club and I were the only ones left in there. He says, we have to close up now, son. You have to leave. And I had one last tool in my toolbox, not much of a tool, but I thought it was a good one. I always thought I could put on a real good newcomer look. So I said, I'm a newcomer, and I have no place to stay, and it's raining outside. Could AA help me? He says, you're in luck. Get a guy named Joe Quinn left a 49 Merc in the parking lot last summer. It doesn't run, but you can sleep in that. You mean the AA answer in Los Angeles is to sleep in an abandoned car? He says, yeah, good deal, huh? That's good. I remember sleeping in that car, got up early in the morning, cold and sick, got in the morning, came up, club was open. I didn't know it was Sunday morning. And they had some cake out, and I ate that, and then they had a meeting on God, and I had to get up and leave that. Because my problem with God is a little different than most people. You hear people, they say, I don't believe in God. I believed in God. And by this time, I had broken all 10 commandments. And in my church, there's no way back from that. And I knew I was going to go to hell, and I didn't want to hear about it. So sometimes people start talking about God, and I cut out. And hung around the club that day, and that night there's another meeting. I sat through that. God, sick. Wish it stopped raining out there. And the manager said, you know, kid, you have to be a member of the club during the weekdays to be in here, but weekends you came in fine, but on weekdays you have to be a member of the club. You have to join the club. He said, but you're such a mess. You'll die in our parking lot out there and make this look bad. You can come in here, but on three reasons you have to do. Don't ask anybody for money. None of your smart remarks. I already had a reputation of being smart remarks. And you have to go to one of our meetings every night. I thought, oh, God, that's terrible. If I'd had a coin, I'd have flipped it. I didn't have a coin, so, all right. And I went to those meetings every night. And once in a while, people would buy me some little food at the grill there. And it's just terrible, just the worst week in rain and sick and desperate. It turned to be my sobriety date. And I think that's straight. Of all the times I wouldn't want to stay sober, that was as good a time as any. I often think, why in the world would I stay sober when there was no reason to stay sober? And I had tried to stay sober once in my life. One of the things about my drinking is that sometimes, even when I was doing well, when I get to a certain stage of drinking, I kind of become Captain Justice. And I find policemen making unfair arrests, and I step in. And I point out how policemen are fascist pigs, and they should not be allowed around people. And I've been arrested several times for that. And I've gone to jail, no big deal, overnight, you let you out in the morning. And I got so I could just go home, take a shower, and go to work. And that's no big deal. But I got out of jail once in Texas. And I got out of jail, and I was getting a beef for a couple nights before. And this time a neighbor had come down to pick me up, and I thought, well, we shouldn't have done that. But I explained to him, this cop was really wrong. I got his badge number. I'm going to see if I can get his job. He said, I don't know about that. He said, but while you were drunk last night, we couldn't find you, and your little son died. We had no way to find you. And it just about killed me. I mean, as has been said, having a child die is a sad thing, but to die while you're in jail drunk is God, that added a fillip to it. And we finally took the little boy up to Wisconsin and buried him in his grandmother's, foot of his grandmother's grave, and came back. And I realized that drinking, although that wasn't really my problem, it has caused me a lot of problems. And I stopped drinking. And I came home at night and had dinner with my family. I had a bunch of little girls. I had one little boy, and the little boy had died. We had dinner, and we'd go for rides, and we'd talk, and I got to work on time, and it was really remarkable. Every time we ate a meal, we'd pray for baby John, just like Easter. Somebody had died, but he died for our sins. And I had an excellent 3 or 4 weeks. It's just the most normal 4 weeks I've ever had in my life that I can recall. But then, unfortunately, one night, somebody came in and stuck an invisible spring in my gut. And the next day, they started to tighten it. And the next day, I began to realize I'm really being screwed around here. And pretty soon, it became obvious to me, this damn Norwegian Lutheran God, who I was still trying to be a good guy, had taken my little boy, who never committed a sin in his life, and killed him to punish me because I was a sinner. Well, screw you! I'll go to hell, but I want to take your shit while I'm alive. And that was the end of God in my life. But the pressure kept mounting. And the days went by, and pretty soon I didn't like my job anymore that I really liked. And my daughters was doing it for, Mary, take your sisters and go to your room. For God's sakes, leave me alone. I'm sorry, I don't mean that. I just take. And I knew it could be solved by a couple drinks. But I had taken a vow in my son's casket I would not drink. And I just got insane after a while. One day my wife took the kids to Mass, And I pulled the car in the garage and hooked up the hose in the exhaust pipe and turned the motor and went to sleep and died. I didn't know what, I was just crazed. And the guy next door sitting in his breakfast nook, apparently having a cup of coffee, and saw me go in there and heard the motor running, and I didn't come out. So he ambled over after a while and found me dead in the car. They pulled me out and beat my chest and breathed in my mouth, and they rushed me to the hospital and examined me for several days and determined I was seriously mentally ill and committed me to the state insane asylum for an indefinite period. Nothing on my commitment paper said alcohol. It said schizophrenic with paranoid tendencies. I thought about that later, you know. I always wanted to kind of go back and find that psychiatrist, made that diagnosis that I was some sort of a dual personality. He must be about 90 now. I can move him around pretty good, you know. Just tell him, how dare you diagnose me as a dual personality, you idiot! If I could have got my personalities down to 2, I'd have been all right. My problem has always been this group that gathers in my head every time the heat is on. What do you think we ought to do? Let's get out of here. I'm not sure we can. Look over that way. No. I used to hear people say, I found great help in group therapy. I never needed group therapy. I just go for a ride alone in my car. That's what's so good about alcohol. Alcohol reduces it to one voice. It may be a bad voice, but it's one voice. Why don't you quit your job and punch him in the face? But I was in that insane asylum till the next year because I was in there on an indefinite commitment. It was tough getting out. They finally put it in the alcoholic ward, and I pretended to be an alcoholic and got out that way, or else I would still be there maybe. But that's how I get to when I stop drinking. Why would I stop drinking now when there's no reason whatever except to be cold and sick? And as far as I can tell, the reason I stopped drinking, in those meetings I had to go to, 3 nights at least, maybe 2 or 3 nights, I saw a man that I'd seen in the movies. A movie star. A movie star. What is a movie star? Rich man. I bet he would like to have a new friend. And I moved in on him, and he didn't want a new friend, turned out. And by the end of the week, I was desperate. It was still raining. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. And I was sleeping in this damn car, and I thought, I'll have to go all out. So I went up to him, I said, Bob, I really admire your program. Would you be my sponsor? He said, okay, kid, but I want you to do what I tell you. Oh, sure, Bob. It turned out I found out later he wasn't a movie star at all. He'd been in 3 movies, little character parts, and I saw 2 of them, so I thought he was a movie star. He never was a movie star. I've been in 6 movies, and I'm not a movie star. He was certainly not. But he was a good guy. They said he wasn't a good actor, but he was, because he was able to act nicely at meetings. And that took a lot of acting for him, because he turned out to be a right-wing fascist AA pig of the worst sort. Just a, do this, do this. I thought, why am I taking this crap from this idiot? Because he was my only meal ticket out of there. And one thing I discovered quickly, he was not very smart. And I knew I was much smarter than he was. But I had to disguise it, because nobody likes to sponsor people who are smarter than you are. So I pretend to be dumb. But he would try to help me, take me a couple of meetings where he was speaking, and he talked to me in the club. And I think he tried. But he would say dumb things, and I have to bite my tongue and keep him. But he'd really say dumb things. One night we were at a meeting somewhere, and he said to somebody, and I overheard him, he said, as long as you think your problem is alcohol, you're going to die drunk. And on the way home, I said, Mom, I heard you tell that guy that as long as he thinks his problem is alcohol, he's going to die drunk. You said that in an AA meeting where people come with an alcohol problem. What the hell are you talking about? He said, people with an alcohol problem shouldn't be in AA. They're taking up time. Are there kind of hot lights out in the set today, Bob? Oh. I mean, I had told him previously that I wasn't an alcoholic. I said, I'm not an alcoholic. I got a lot of emotional problems and I drink a lot, but I'm not an alcoholic. I want you to know that. And he said, okay. I said, how can you say these people are not alcoholics? He said, kid, if the problem is alcohol, you don't need AA and you're wasting our time. If your problem is alcohol, here's what you do. You quit drinking, you clean up your act, and decide not to drink, and it's all over. I said, that's stupid, Bob. I've tried that 250 times. He said, that's because your problem isn't alcohol, kid. You must have the same thing we got. And what's that, Bob? He said, something that sounds like alcohol, and it fools people, sometimes kills them. Something called alcoholism. I said, oh, Jesus, Bob. Don't play word games with me. I look bad, but I'm smarter than hell. It's time you knew. Alcoholism, hooray, I'm cured. Shut up, he explained. And he gave me a long harangue, most of which I was able to blot out, thank God. But some of it got through, apparently, got into my gut. And looking back, and it was beginning of changing my life, although I never guessed it at the time. He said, kid, you got to remember this. Stopping drinking with an alcohol problem is the answer. However, in this strange thing called alcoholism, which unfortunately for people like you and I looks almost exactly the same to the naked eye, this mind-consuming, perception-distorting, bodily eroding, fatal thing called alcoholism, you'll discover that stopping drinking and cleaning up your act has no significant long-term effect on your life other than to gradually make it so painful you can't stand it. I said, Jesus, Bob. I never heard anybody say that before. They always say, get sober and you'll get better. I said, nah, maybe for a little while, but it's bad. Then why do these alcoholics drink? If it's so bad for them, why do they drink? He says, they don't drink because it's bad for them, kid. He says, you claim you know so much being bound to run AA for 10 years. You don't know hardly anything. Do you know what an alcoholic is? An alcoholic is a person who gets an unnatural reaction to alcohol. Yes, I know that. It sets up a phenomenon of craving, and then you drink and go crazy and die. I said, nah, it's podium talk. I'll tell you why alcoholics drink, kid. And he had a Coke in his hand. Is this for Johnny Walker? I'll tell you what. If I take a big drink, it would almost instantly alter my perception of reality. When I have a couple of drinks, it almost instantly alters my perception of the people around me. When I have a few drinks, it almost instantly makes me taller and more self-contained in my gut, and them less threatening to me. I said, Jesus, Bob, what's wrong with that? And he said, and I hate to have to quote him, he said, because it is not really happening, you asshole. It may seem cute to you, it didn't seem cute to me. I understand. You mean to tell me that alcoholics get a different reaction to alcohol than non-alcoholics? He said, absolutely, that's what makes them alcoholics. He said, ordinary people drink. And it goes, blah, blah, blah. You and I drink, kid. And it goes, he says, you say you've been in all these years of therapy. Do you know any therapy anywhere takes a man on his way to commit suicide, stop in for 2 going-away drinks, and 10 minutes later you're down the bar saying things like, you with anyone, Granny? God, that's great. Well, I said, I understand that, Bob. But tonight at the meeting, there was a guy there who'd been sober, and he got drunk again. Why would he get drunk again and drink that crap when he knows it's going to be bad? He said, that's the other part of the problem, kid. You don't even know as much as you think. And he had a theory that seemed silly to me at the time, but very true. He said, when you're born and raised, it's tough growing up. Life doesn't seem fair a lot. People, grown-ups can screw you around. You got to learn you have to solve problems you don't even understand. You got to resolve conflicts. That goes on for years, and you got to learn to live in the world around you. It's very difficult. It isn't fair sometimes. And he said that whole process is called maturing. But if you can get through that and become a mature person, you really can live a pretty good life. You can hold a job, instinctively know how to hold a job, get along with your co-employees, get along with your mate, get along with your kids, instinctively know how to be a parent, get along with the neighbors because you understand they're not against you, they're just they're looking out for themselves, go on square vacations and enjoy them. He says it's really a great life, but it almost never happens to alcoholics. Why is that, Bob? He said, because we have learned along the way we don't have to suffer till we find answers to our problems. We don't have to resolve conflicts. We can drink them away. Here's to you, beneficial finance. Here's to you, bitch. I never liked you anyway. Hey, Mr. Carlson, take your job and shove it up your nose. And it really works. I can tell you that from experience. But unfortunately, as you pointed out to me, what happens is every time it works, it adds a little extra part to that little bag somewhere in my system made up of unresolved problems, unresolved childish problems. We call them alcoholic emotions. It sounds a little nicer, but they're childish emotions. And it's there. The day comes, I'm going to straighten up and fly right, do things right now. No more of this crap, no more of this drinking too much, no more of this not getting along with people, going to go to work, come home, do things. On a job, for example, happens anywhere in your life, but on a job especially. And never once know it is impossible for me to do that. Why? Because sooner or later, someone will trigger those childish emotions. Someone will hurt my feelings. Someone will put me down. Someone will say something bad about me, and I'll hear about it. And the motor starts. And little by little, you realize these people are trying to screw you around. And when I was a young man, I had a solution for that. I'd go find the guy, and I'd punch him in the face, and I'd quit the job. But when you got a bunch of kids and a house to take, you can't do that. You got to take it. And you go, and little by little, as you go along, I guess a little touch of paranoia, you begin to see there are others, they're his friends that are in on this to get to me. And I try so hard to do right, and these fools are getting, man, just really. And after a while, sometimes I find myself lying awake at night, thinking about these, why don't these bastards get off my case and treat me right? It's just, and it gets bad. Scientists who study alcoholics like us say that you can get to a point where you literally must drink to preserve your sanity. Isn't that ironic? And so I drink, eventually. And when I drink, that starts the fire, and pretty soon I'm gone. Another exposure. Clancy, why'd you leave that job? You had such a great job. Oh, they were a bunch of phonies. I didn't like it. That's a crappy job. I'll get a better job. And I, again and again, my whole life is a series of bad breaks and misunderstandings. And Bob explained this to me, and I said, Jesus, Bob, that's the story of my life. I've had some big jobs. I've had hundreds of people under me. I've had successes. I directed a grand opera that won a national prize. And here I am sleeping in the back seat of an abandoned car, for Christ's sake. He said, don't feel so bad, kid. There's a name for people like you. I thought, what could that be? He said, you're an alcoholic. I said, if that's what an alcoholic is, I guess that's what I am. But are you sure I'm an alcoholic? Alcohol's not my... He said, kid, look up there on the wall. What do they ask you? Ask you to admit you're having a problem with alcohol, And then there's a dash, which in the English language means end of thought, beginning of new thought. You also must admit you're having a problem without alcohol. And then he said something that I would say to the new people here tonight is so accurate. He said, if either one of these forces weren't in progress, you wouldn't be here. If you could drink, you'd be out drinking. If you could stay sober comfortably, you'd be home watching the telly. But when you can't do either, you're driven to meetings like this, and you sit there and watch your head try to find ways to prove you're different so you can get out of there and drink again. Just ironic. I said, Jesus, Bob, I guess I'm an alcoholic. That was in December 1958. I'd been sober 6 weeks maybe. And my life didn't change. It's still terrible. But I think what helped me is this. I began to think, well, maybe I'm not secretly insane after all. Maybe there's a name for this. And he helped me get a little job, and I got fired because of my smart mouth, got another little job. And when I was about 6 months sober, I remember Bill Wilson got discouraged. I didn't know it then. But I just got fired as a dishwasher at the Gaiety Delicatessen. If a guy with my background and intelligence can't hold a job as a dishwasher, but I had a good reason for it. It seemed to me the busboys were bringing in more dishes than the waitresses were taking out, which led me to believe that they were persecuting me because I was an Anglo and not a Mexican. So I just piled up their damn dishes. Do it yourself, you spick, you know. Well, I miscounted, actually. But I got fired, and I just had such a wave of despondency. I was surrounded in that AA club by people who I wouldn't hire to mow my lawn in my good days, and they were all doing well, and I was doing nothing. And I decided I went to the club, I was thinking about maybe killing myself. And I saw Bob, and I don't know what prompted me. I said, Bob, I want to talk to you about something. I'm going to tell you something that you may not want to be around me after this, but I've never told this to a soul. I've always secretly known it. And I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm corrupt. I'm thoroughly corrupt. I'm corrupt mentally. I'm corrupt socially. I'm corrupt financially. I use people. I screwed people around my whole life. I lie. I cheat. I steal. I'm just the opposite of all. When I was a little boy, I wanted to grow up to be a tall, blonde Viking doing good for mankind. And I'm a stinking, lousy, drunken cheat. I waited to see if you'd say, well, get away from me then. He said, well, that isn't so bad. We got a lot of people like you around here. And I thought to myself, maybe this guy knows how I feel. And I thought about that all day. God, does he know how I feel? Because I had never known anybody that I thought knew how I felt. My dad didn't, my doctor didn't, my minister didn't, they all said they did. We know how you feel. You have to say, gee, thanks. But you want to say, no, you don't know how I feel. But if you're kind of new, I hope you find somebody that you believe knows how you feel. And I'll tell you why. As I mentioned last night, people like us are just a magnet for advice. Everybody gives us advice. Here's what I think you ought to do. Everybody tell the drunk what to do. But if you can find someone who believes know how you feel, that gets right through that wall of defiance, right into your head. And you may find yourself taking actions around here that you would never take under any conditions. I remember standing at the Brentwood meeting when I was 3 months sober. You never heard of Brentwood, but that's about 6 blocks from where O.J. Simpson didn't kill his wife. I was in the Brentwood meeting, and my sponsor said to me, see that woman over there? I said, yes, I see her. He said, I want you to apologize to her. I said, why should I, Bob? He said, somebody told me that Monday night at the meeting at the club, you called her a bitch. She is a bitch. Why do you think she's a bitch? She told her new girl to stay away from me. Well, she's right. You apologize. I can't think of a person in the world telling me that I wouldn't have said, to hell with you. Go over there and abase myself in front of that puss bag. All she's ever done is badmouth me since I've been around. She tries to turn people against me. I've apologized to her till every day. She made me crawl. I'm too good for that. I wouldn't do nothing for her. But somebody that I believed knew how I felt, told me to do it. So the first time in my adult life, I said, I'm sorry I called you a bitch. You bitch. But he got me to hold on to a job that I wanted to quit. He got me to go to meetings where I thought they were putting me down. And little by little, my life changed. I finally held a job for almost 4 months before I got fired. Well, I was a big advance. I had a little one-room apartment in Hollywood with a hot plate and a shower. God, I just felt good. Best home I ever had, I thought. And in my second year, I held a job 6 or 7 months before I got fired. And I was on my way, and I had some friends. I got believing in AA, and I felt good. It just didn't go my way. Just after my second birthday, someone said, "I've been watching you. You're doing a good job." And they offered me a job as a beginning writer in a big medical corporation. And I said, "Oh, I'd love that." I didn't want to say I'm a successful writer. I used to be, but I went to. My sponsor took me down, got me a couple ill-fitting suits at the thrift shop, and some shirts and T-shirts and jacket. And I went to work. I still had no front teeth, but I learned to carry my lip like this. And my first week, they gave me an assignment that I couldn't do. I did the best job. It was just wonderful. They were just crazy. How did you ever? And I put in stuff they never heard. And I thought, I'm on my way now, baby. Here we come. And at the end of about a week, I heard a guy say, "That guy doesn't have any front teeth." I said, "Well, I'll be damned. I'm trying so hard." And they ridicule me and laugh at me. I could just feel those emotions starting. I thought, I might as well just punch him out and quit this job. I'm going to be nothing ever. And I thought, but if I do that, I'll have to explain it to that damn Bob. So I called him Bob and said, "Bob, I'm trying so hard. They like my work here, but this guy's laughing at me, putting me down, sneering at me. They got no front teeth. What do I do, Bob? I'm going to punch him out." He said, "Ask him why he said it." I said, "What do you mean, for God's sake, why he said it? You know why he said it. He's trying to put me down." He said, "Go ask him why he said it." "Oh, ask him why he said it." I said maturely. And I finally got a hold of this guy. I got him aside and I said, "I heard you say that I didn't have any front teeth. You think that's kind of funny?" He said, "Oh, no, just the opposite." He said, "You really hit that job so well this week, and now you're a guy without any front teeth. You're wearing ill-fitting, obviously second-hand clothes. Something bad must have happened to you. You're making a comeback, but you're really doing a great job. I have a lot of admiration for you." And I said, "Oh." There were several times in the first year there I had to call Bob because people were treating me badly. But I finally got a little pattern, and when I was 5 years sober, I was director of advertising for that big corporation. Had front teeth, smiled a lot. If any of you new people have lost teeth, let me give you hope. Once you become spiritually pure, they grow back. When I was 7 years sober, another guy and I were brought into Hollywood and recreated something called Boss Radio. Became the #1 hard rock station in the world. We all wore shiny suits and said, "What's coming on down, baby?" And in fact, we entertained the Beatles when they came from England to America. Tomorrow night I'm having dinner with one of them so he can show his gratitude, that goof. And I was 10 years sober. I was downtown doing public relations for an oil company. 15 years sober. I was a marketing director in Beverly Hills. When I was 5 years sober, the same wife and all those children heard the crinkle of green in my wallet all the way to Dallas, Texas. Leaped out of their post office box, rushed to my side, attached themselves with a group of starving chiggers. 9 months and 10 seconds later, another Catholic hit the street. But a little boy, I cried when he was born. I had a little boy again. And then somebody gave me a book on the rhythm system. We ended all that stuff. And now they're all grown up. My three oldest daughters turned 19 this year in AA, all of them. The oldest one got sober, and then the next one got pressured, and the next one after that. And they're all doing well. And none of my other kids are alcoholics. My son He was the apple of my eye, as you can imagine. He became captain of his football team. I would fly back from wherever I was to run the 10-yard chains for him, and we were very close. He went off to university and studied computers. Now he's a computer game wizard. He just finished doing Spider-Man 3, and he's got a great reputation. But he's turned into an alcoholic. And his wife just left him, and his job is in jeopardy. And I'll tell you the most frustrating thing in my life. I sponsor people a lot of places. I sponsor 2 people in this room. One from Bangkok, one from Plymouth. I sponsor people in Australia. I sponsor people in New Zealand and throughout the United States. And they're all going to gather in 2 weeks to help me celebrate my 50th birthday. It's going to be a wonderful occasion. And I can't help my own son. But I know that's true because for all these years, I've been watching people trying to help their sons or their daughters or their mothers or their sisters. You can't do it because it isn't AA talking to you, it's just the old man with his crap again. And so with my own son, I'm put in a position of just praying. And I pray for him earnestly every night. And I hope something will happen. But that's part of what happens in alcoholic families, I guess. Only one of my daughters has turned out bad. You hate to talk about that, but my oldest daughter has become a judge. We so wanted a defense attorney, but no. She came home at Christmas a few years ago and she said, "Daddy, remember when you used to holler at us and send us to our room?" I said, "Sure, honey." She said, "When you come to Albuquerque, I'm going to send you to a little room." I've no need to go to Albuquerque. But it's great. My life was turning, who would have believed it? And the only therapy I had was Alcoholics Anonymous, and I would have bet my life AA couldn't help. I knew about as much about AA the day I got sober as I do today. I never realized the difference was I had never done it. I knew it. I knew it. And because it turns out, if you're new, I'm sure you get a feeling sometimes. You look at some old fool like me up here and say, "Jesus, he's been dry for 50 years. He's probably going to burst into flame any minute." But that isn't the point of AA. It took me a long time to understand the point of Alcoholics Anonymous. It turns out the point of Alcoholics Anonymous, to the best of my knowledge, and that's based on everything I know, is to slowly do what alcohol did fast. To change my perception of reality, to enhance it, to change my relationship to the world around me, to make me more secure and less threatened by what goes on around me. And it can come at any time. It can come in your first 30 days. It doesn't last long, but what was that feeling? Did I feel good there for a minute? What's going on? Yeah. As the years go by and you keep doing these things, you get trying to help others for whatever motive, it comes more often and stays longer. That's all. And you really get feeling good for some period. When I was 15 years sober, I was feeling good. Everything was going my way. And it caught me by surprise feeling good so long. And I found myself doing a strange thing. I resigned my job in Beverly Hills. And for the last 34 years, I run the Skid Row mission that threw me out in 1958. And people say, "Why would you give up your career to run that damn mission?" And there's no good answer to that. Well, for such a significant decrease in salary, I couldn't pass it up. Well, I'm still looking for those people that threw me out. I don't know, but I've been down there a long time. And it's been a great ride for me. But I'm going to do something Tuesday morning when I get back to Los Angeles that none of you are going to do, I don't suppose. I'm going to get up early. I live out by the ocean with a big house. In fact, today there were 150 AAs playing in my yard, playing softball and volleyball. They've been doing that for 40 years. And I'm never there, unfortunately. But I'm going to get up Tuesday morning when I'm home, get in my car, drive down the Santa Monica Freeway, through Beverly Hills. My car still wants to get off there. I will check it out here. Down to the ravaged, sick, dreadful area called Skid Row, park underneath our building, and get out and walk around the building, and as I do every morning, say hello to some people I know and step over the bodies of dying men, women, and children dying from alcoholism and drug addiction and abandonment and insanity. And go in and with 150 employees or so who are working very hard to find ways to get these poor bastards to accept their problem, do something about it before they die. And sometimes we can do it, sometimes we can't. But then at the end of the night, I jump in my car, go home and eat dinner, and then go to a meeting. I'll go to a meeting Tuesday night, which I'm reading at the book study meeting that week, and feel good. Now, it doesn't sound a very exciting life compared to a lot of things I've done, but it's been a very gratifying, because if you feel good, if you sleep well, that's certainly a great help in the world, and feeling kind of good and not having to feel so threatened all the time, even when bad. But you got to remember, new people, you're never going to feel good all the time. Humans can't do that. You have ups and downs. Some days are kind of crappy days. There are some days in everyone's life where you just find yourself saying, come on, midnight. Come on, midnight. Let's get this goddamn day over with, right? But that's just part of life. You try to help others. One of the great reasons for sponsorship, we never think about it. We think being of gracious, being of service to others, helping a person find sobriety. It's all true, it's wonderful, but I'll tell you why you do it. Because when I'm thinking about that sick puke, I'm not thinking about this sick puke. That's why. And it's just like the wind blowing through my hair. Ha 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 ha. Good. Sponsorship, that's why the book says, when all else fails, work with another alcoholic. Get that sick mind out. One of the great reasons of when we were earlier tonight, this young man was talking about his psychiatric experiences. One of the great reasons that psychiatry has not been very effective with alcoholics, apparently, is because they want you to get inside yourself and examine yourself and do something. And they don't realize we've been there all along. The whole point of AA is to get out of self, to get out of self, to get out of your sick self-obsession. And it really is a remarkable factor. I want to just close by saying one thing. It's an amazing thing. When I'm out of myself, I feel better. Always do. A good example of that, when I was 5 years sober, I was doing very well. Had front teeth, director of Advertising Corporation, and I wanted to be secretary of a meeting because I knew more than they did. And the biggest meeting in town was the Brentwood meetings I mentioned earlier, and they had a steering committee where they'd select a secretary, and I had a stooge on that steering committee. So I said, Smokey, nominate me tonight, see what happens. And I saw him the next day, I said, how did it go, kid? He said, died for lack of a second. Well, I didn't care, I just have their names, all of them. And a couple weeks later, a guy said, the little meeting over in Ohio Street, a meeting hall, died. Do you know anybody wants to start a meeting? I said, yes, I do. Let's start a meeting. I could be a secretary, there won't be any damn old election there. And I took some tattered followers over there and I wrote a format, and I based on what I thought was right, and it had one distinction. I think it was the first meeting in the world I ever heard of where the secretary stood at the door and said hello to everybody coming in, and I felt, because I'd gone to so many meetings where nobody ever said hello to you. But we had about 13 people at the first meeting, and I gave my inspiring announcements, and the next week we had about 19 people, and the next week we had about 26 people. Then I offended some people with my announcements, and we were back to 13 people. But it came along. We tried to do that. As it came to a year, we were getting almost 40 people every week. And I thought, a lot of groups did have the election now. But that would be unfair to these people. Most of them are all new. They don't know what the hell's going on. I would abandon them. I won't have an election. I'll sacrifice myself and continue. By the end of the second year, we were getting 65 or 70 people, getting a little reputation. And I thought, we could have the election now, but they're really like an emerging third world country. I mean, they know the words, but they don't have the music. I'm going to sacrifice myself. About a month after that, some boob came up, somebody whose life I had saved, I'm sorry to say. Said, are we ever going to have an election around here? And I said, why? We're following the traditions, we're doing well, we're getting a good reputation. Why do we need an election? He said, other people all say you're a dictator, and if we had an election and voted for you, nobody could say a word. I said, good idea, Jimmy. So the next week I announced, next week we'll have the election, and I tried to give them, I said, now I'm stepping down. Of course you can vote for whoever you wish. Anyone here can be voted for. I hope you'll vote for someone who can do a good job, but make sure it's someone that you respect. And we had the election, they swept me out of office. And to show you what a good job I had done, even after I left, it really took off. And now it's the largest AA meeting in the world. About 1,000 people every Wednesday night. Some of you have been there. And we send more money to New York than most groups. Last year we sent $11,000 in birthday candle money. And I'm not the secretary, but I'm the founder. I sit in the middle and I give little signals. Nobody pays any attention and cheers me up. At the end of the meeting, sometimes they'll bring new people over to me, and I'm dressed in a shirt and tie because I'm on the way home from work. They say, this is Clancy. He's been sober a long time. He started this meeting. He flies all over the world to talk at AA meetings. And they go, oh. And I smile, say, hi there. Hope you brought your problems tonight. Many folks leave them here. It's just kind of a dull, tedious thing. Once in a while, some goof will come up who doesn't know who I am. Hey, Bal, can you give me a ride back over to the VA hospital psycho ward? And the great message of AA is you can think whatever you want to. I can look right into his sick little eyes and think, what? Give you a ride to the VA psycho ward? You should have stayed there, you crazy bastard. There's 1,000 people in this room who need help desperately. There's one who's been giving all for almost half a century, day after day after day. I'm not just some guy in a shirt and tie. I'm Clancy I from up in the sky. I can think that as long as I say, okay. And the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous is always the same. I drop that puke off with the VA system, and I drive home and my head says, oh, Clancy, is there no end to your goodness? Damnedest thing, against intellect, against logic. That's what we're here for. You help one another, not even for their sake, but for your sake. And that's the purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous. We all look altruistic, but that's what they mean, a selfish program. I will go to the wall for you because it'll save my life. That's the purpose of it. So that's why we're here. And I look back now and I look at that club, 1958, and I'm the only survivor. And I was the only one they thought wouldn't stay sober. Isn't it amazing? Nothing to gloat about, feel good. It's a remarkable thing. If you do these things, you can be a sick, crazy goof. But if you take these actions, eventually life gets better. And the purpose of AA is not to make you wonderful, it's to make everybody else shape up. And little by little, they shape up and I can live with them. And if I don't go to meetings, they all go to hear it and go to hell again. I have to shape them up. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other. And we must do that. And sometimes I could almost cry to think how lucky I am to be here. And yet other times I have to remind myself to be grateful, because that's the way it is when you're a human being. But to those of you who are new, hang in here. You be the survivor 50 years from now.